Here we go. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. It's good to see everybody and to have even some new people and some guests. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with the blessing for studying Torah. And then we're going to review a little bit of where we are because some people haven't been here before. And also we haven't met in a few weeks. So let me share. Here it is. Okay, share. Move it over.
Do you want us to mute ourselves?
That would be great. I don't know why I can't move this thing over, but all right. Can you guys all see this?
Yeah.
Okay. So we are going to recite this together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of all, who hallows us with mitzvot, commanding us to engage in the words of Torah. Okay, so get rid of that for the future. There we go. Okay, so where are we? We're in the book of Kings. So for those who haven't followed, we have spent about 10 years going through the Torah verse by verse, and we've gone beyond the Torah into the section of the Hebrew scriptures called Nevi'im, which is prophets. And the section that we're in right now is the historical prophets. So when we're done with this section, which we hopefully will be done in the spring, we would be moving into the major prophets like Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, etc. But the section we're in now is the historical section, starting with Joshua, the Israelites coming into the land of Israel. And the judges where it was sort of a loose confederation of tribes, to the book of Samuel. There are two books of Samuel where eventually there's a king, King David, followed by King Solomon. Now King David consolidates the whole country, creates one country. Solomon builds a temple. And unfortunately, to build a temple, what happens? You have to impose labor on people. You have to impose a corvée. And you also have to impose taxes, right? So as a result, people came to him, to his descendant, to his son, and said, please don't keep imposing this tough stuff on us. You know, give us some relief. And the king, whose name was Rehoboam, said, I'm going to double down on all of this and give you even more. So that resulted in the split of the kingdoms. So you have the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah. And so in the first book of Kings, we start with, you know, the end of David's reign, the beginning of Solomon's reign, and the splitting of the country. So we are now in the second book of Kings. And what we've been reading about recently is about the prophet Elijah, who's a very important prophet. Anybody remember what happens to Elijah? Why is he so important? Why is he the precursor of the Messianic era and of the world to come? And why do we put out a cup for him at Passover? What about Elijah?
He never died.
I'm sorry, say that louder. He never died, right? So Elijah, just try to manipulate a few things here. So Elijah is the guy he was the prophet who confronted King Ahab. King Ahab was a very successful from the northern kingdom of Israel. He was a very successful king as far as the economy goes and politics and whatever, but he was married to, who was he married to? Jezebel, okay. Poor Jezebel. She really wasn't a terrible person. It's just that she believed in a different kind of God, right? Who was the God she believed in? Anybody remember? Baal. You remember where she was from? Phoenicia. Okay. And so, you know, she had a different God that she believed in, and Elijah did not like that. So they confronted each other, and their prophets confronted each other. But when it was time for him to go to die, he didn't actually die, right? He was swept up into the sky. So he's sort of a liminal figure between life and death. And that's why he ended up being the person that, is going to announce the world to come. Okay, so we are now at a point where he has given the mantle to, anybody remember who the next prophet was? Sounds a little bit like Elijah. Elisha, right? So Elisha is now the new prophet. And that's where we're going to pick it up. And there have been, of course, a lot of wars. There's always some country that's trying to take over the other countries. As we discussed last time, I think you might remember, it's sort of depressing because all of these sort of crazy wars and corruption and all the stuff that we deal with today existed then, and nothing has changed, right? We don't learn from history. It's really kind of depressing. Okay, so we're going to start reading, and who would like to read first? I'm going to, because I won't be able to see you after I start sharing. Who would like to read? Oh, Sherry, and then Christine. Okay, we'll start with Sherry. So here we are. For some strange reason, now Zoom tells you that you can see what I'm showing you. Well, I'm glad to hear that. Okay, so why don't we go ahead and start?
Sorry, I was muted.
Yeah.
Joram,
Uh-huh.
Joram, son of Ahab, became king of Israel in Samaria in the 18th year of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, and he reigned 12 years. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, but not as his father and mother had done. He got rid of the sacred stone of Baal that his father had made. Nevertheless, he clung to the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he had caused Israel to commit. He did not turn away from them.
Okay, let me just stop you for 1 second. I just want to point out, okay, Samaria, of course, is at the north, and you hear a lot about this in referring to Israel, Judea and Samaria, right? Samaria was the old, capital of the north, and which is, of course, coming from here. This is why people who want to hang on to the West Bank of the Jordan don't want to, give it back or give it up or whatever, because they say this is where, we had people in a kingdom, way back. Also, the other thing is, remember, let me just stop sharing just for 1 sec. Remember that this history is written by the victors, and the victors ultimately are the people from Judah in the south, right? The northern kingdom gets destroyed by Assyria, right? And so Judah ends up being the last guy standing, and Judah writes the history. So there's a lot of these kings in the north do evil in the eyes of God over and over and over again, right? And that's their downfall. And then they get punished. How do they get punished? By some other country or some other nation coming along and, trying to take them over or kill them or whatever. And that's the punishment because of their, lack of loyalty to God. Now, notice, again, throughout this part of the historical prophets, the thing that's bad that the Israelites do is that they are not loyal to God, our God, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, right? They're not loyal. That is their sin. Later, with later prophets, it'll be more about you treated the widow, the orphan, the stranger badly. You exploited people. But right now, it's really about loyalty to Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. All right, we'll go back to the text and let's go down here. Okay, please continue.
Now, Mesha, king of Moab, raised sheep, and he had to pay the king of Israel a tribute of 100,000 lambs and the wool of 100,000 rams. But after Ahab died, the king of Moab rebelled against the king of Israel. So at that time, King Joram set out from Samaria and mobilized all Israel. He also sent this message to Jehoshaphat, king of Judah. The king of Moab has rebelled against me will you go with me to fight against Moab? I will go with you, he replied. I am as you are, my people as your people, my horses as your horses.
Okay, let's stop for a sec. Sorry to interrupt, but I just want to point out, so Moab is a vassal of Israel, of the country of Israel. And that's why they're paying them tribute of 100,000 lambs and the wool of 100,000 rams, right? They're rebelling. I mean, Ahab was a pretty, strong king. And so once he dies, they figure, we have our opportunity to get out from under. And he goes to the king of Judah, right? So we're talking about the northern and the southern kingdoms. Can you join me in fighting against Moab? Now, it's interesting that what this King Mesha says to Jehoshaphat is exactly the same, just about the same words as Jehoshaphat said to the king of Israel back in the last book, chapter 22. Again, occasionally they make alliances to fight against enemies, but they're still not, united.
Rabbi Singer, it
Yes.
also sounds a little bit like what Ruth says. Where you go.
Oh, nice. Very nice. Yeah, absolutely. Ruth says, where you go, I will go. Yeah, your God will be my God. Where you die, I will die. Nice. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so we'll go back to this. God, every time I share the screen, it says participants can now see what you're showing them. Anyway, go ahead.
By what route shall we attack? He asked. Through the desert of Edom, he answered. So the king of Israel set out with the king of Judah and the king of Edom. After a roundabout march of 7 days, the army had no more water for themselves or for the animals with them. What? Exclaimed the king of Israel. Has the Lord called us 3 kings together only to deliver us into the hands of Moab? But Jehoshaphat asked, is there no prophet of the Lord here through whom we may inquire of the Lord? An officer of the king of Israel answered, Elijah, son of Shaphat, is here. He used to pour water on the hands of Elijah. Jehoshaphat said, the word of the Lord is with him. So the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat and the king of Edom went down to him.
Okay, so just want to point out that they're taking a roundabout route, right? Roundabout march. They're trying to avoid going directly into the land of Moab, into the Moab's, army. And so as a result of that, they run out of water, which is, of course, a problem for all of them. And now they're going to go to Elisha and see if Elisha can give them some good news. There we go.
Elisha said to the king of Israel, why do you want to involve me? Go to the prophets of your father and the prophets of your mother. No, the king of Israel answered, because it was the Lord who called us 3 kings together to deliver us into the hands of Moab.
So of course, he's saying, go to those other prophets like Baal, the prophets of Baal. Go ask them, since that's who your parents seem to be, connected to, right?
Elisha said, as surely as the Lord Almighty lives, whom I serve, if I did not have respect for the presence of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, I would not pay any attention to you. But now bring me a harpist.
Okay, so stop 1 second. Now, interestingly, so Elisha, is not really interested in helping the king of Israel, right? Because the king of Israel is from this descent, he's a descendant of Ahab and Jezebel. And they were not, really loyal to God. And they brought in these other prophets and this other God. And so he's not really interested in helping him. But the king of Judah, of course, is, a good guy. So he's willing to do that. And now the bringing in the harpist, apparently using a stringed instrument or a percussive instrument to induce an ecstatic state was known in that area. So this is not unusual to bring a harpist in, except for one problem. Why does Elisha need to go through this sort of ritual in order to connect with God when he certainly should have a direct line to God? But in any event, he's bringing in this harpist. I think I'm going to stop for 1 sec. Eric Sabar plays the drums, right? And stringed instruments, I guess the guitar would qualify. Yeah, so this does give us a sense of being in a different state, right? When we hear music, or specifically a drum, or, I don't know about a guitar, but certainly a harp, or, a lyre. I don't know who plays a lyre anymore, but that does put us in a different state of mind. So you can understand how that would work. Again, it's a little strange that the prophet would need that, but so be it. Okay. So, go ahead. So we have the harpist now.
Where are we?
Right here, while the harpist was
Oh,
playing.
while the harpist was playing, the hand of the Lord came on Elisha, and he said, "This is what the Lord says. I will fill this valley with pools of water. For this is what the Lord says, you will see neither wind nor rain. Yet this valley will be filled with water, and you, your cattle, and your other animals will drink. This is an easy thing in the eyes of the Lord. He will also deliver Moab into your hands. You will overthrow every fortified city and every major town. You will cut down every good tree, stop up all the springs, and ruin every good field with stones."
Okay, let me stop you there for a second. All right, anything wrong with this picture? And I'm thinking very specifically of verse 19.
Rabbi, what's wrong with this picture is you're not allowed to cut down trees.
Exactly. In
That
Deuteronomy,
is a rule of warfare, and I think it was established in the Torah.
yes, Deuteronomy chapter 20. Absolutely. You're not supposed to cut down, fruit trees anyway.
Right, because
And-
they take so long to grow. Well, any tree does. It takes so long to grow,
Yeah,
And the
Olivia just read
opposite
it.
of that story, I'm sorry, the opposite of that story is this, I think it's a midrash, where the question is, what you are planting, you are working in your fields and you are planting a tree and the Messiah comes, what do? And the answer is you keep on planting the tree.
exactly.
Yeah, because
Exactly.
that's more important, because it gives so much life to the soil and to everything around it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Eric?
Oh, I was just going to say that was part of Olivia's Torah portion that she read for her bat mitzvah just recently, was about the rules for warfare and trees. And she made a painting for those of you that we use that of a tree and so on.
That's
Yeah.
true. Absolutely. Yeah, you're not supposed to cut down the fruit trees. And, actually the rules of war, if they were ever followed, are pretty decent, right? Because first of all, you're supposed to give people the opportunity to surrender, right? First of all. Second of all, you're supposed to give them, you're not supposed to surround the entire city. You're supposed to leave an exit route. And you're not supposed to destroy the fruit trees. And yeah, and Olivia did do a beautiful painting that really expressed all of this, which was wonderful.
So why is God asking him to do that?
That's a great question. I don't have the answer. Maybe Elisha didn't hear the prophecy properly. I don't know, but it's a problem. And in Robert Alter's translation, whose notes I usually share with you, he just says it's contrary to Deuteronomy. But let me just see, this is chapter 3. He doesn't give you a reason either. Let me just see, what verse was that? Verse 19. Okay, what does he say? This is in direct contradiction to Deuteronomy 20, which prohibits cutting down an enemy's fruit trees. That's all he says.
Mhm.
I guess God can be contradictory too. All right, let's okay, so we're going to move down here. Okay.
Next morning, about time for offering the sacrifice, there it was, water flowing from the direction of Edom, and the land was filled with water. Now all the Moabites had heard that the kings had come to fight against them. So every man, young and old, who could bear arms was called up and stationed on the border. When they got up early in the morning, the sun was shining on the water. To the Moabites across the way, the water looked red, like blood. That's blood, they said. Those kings must have fought and slaughtered each other. Now to the plunder, Moab.
So here you go. What's happening here?
It's an illusion.
Exactly.
It's an illusion.
It's the sun,
So
the
that
sun on the
so
water.
the Moabites, well, I think the Moabites are probably outnumbered anyway. But it's a trick, and if you just look through the whole Bible, there's so many tricks and ruses in order for the Israelites to survive. And this is one of them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a trick.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I don't have the specifics anymore, but when I was in Israel once, we had a guide who was talking to us about the I think the war in 73, the Yom Kippur War. And of course, the Israelis were, completely surprised by this. And they were fighting on the Golan Heights and they were outnumbered. But they did some kind of trick where they would turn on the light of a tank or whatever they had up there at different times. And again, I don't remember the details, but whatever it was that they did, it made it look like they had way more people than they did. And they were able to win that way. So it's not just about how many troops you have, it's also about how smart you are and how you're fighting the war. So as you said, this is one of many times that it's happened for either the Israelites or the Israelis, right?
Mhm.
They're very smart.
This is a dumb question, Rabbi. When
sure.
they're talking about the king of Israel, are we talking Northern Kingdom or
Northern
Southern?
Kingdom.
Northern
Yes,
Kingdom.
yes.
I just wanted to double
That
check.
guy with the complicated name is from Judah.
Okay.
Yeah. So what's happened here is that the Moabites think, oh, all that blood must be because those kings that are, working together got into a fight with each other, and now they're all kind of dead. So we can go plunder, because that's what you do when you have a war, you plunder, right?
And this is another assumption, I think, on their part, which is that these kings don't normally get along together. So you could make this assumption that they got into some sort of fight, that they killed each other, and their blood is on the water.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Let's go on. So we're going to go down here. Surprise, surprise, when they got there.
But when the Moabites came to the camp of Israel, the Israelites rose up and fought them until they fled. And the Israelites invaded the land and slaughtered the Moabites. They destroyed the towns, and each man threw a stone on every good field until it was covered. They stopped up all the springs and cut down every good tree. Only Kir Hareseth was left with its stones in place, but men armed with slings surrounded it and attacked it. When the king of Moab saw that the battle had gone against him, he took with him 700 swordsmen to break through to the king of Edom, but they failed. Then he took his firstborn son, who was to succeed him as king, and offered him as a sacrifice on the city wall. The fury against Israel was great. They withdrew and returned to their own land.
Okay, so let's look at, excuse me, a couple things here. So as you know from Greek mythology, sacrificing, it's usually your daughter, is one way to placate your god. And here you have this guy sacrificing his firstborn son, which is really horrible. And there are a couple other occasions in the Bible where somebody sacrifices their son. It's never an Israelite, but you can see how this resonates with the Akedah, right? The almost sacrifice of Isaac, the binding of Isaac, where, one interpretation of millions is that was a way to say, we don't believe in sacrificing our kids. But here is somebody who actually does that. And then this very strange thing at the end, again, pointed out by Alter, why is there a fury against Israel all of a sudden? right? I mean, what do they do? I mean, they were told to fight this way, and they did. What? They destroyed all the trees, and they put stones to completely destroy all the fields. And somehow they're in trouble. So we don't know why. There's a lot of stuff in the Bible that, is inexplicable, unless anybody has an idea about it. Go ahead, Christine.
Well, maybe because they did things that you weren't supposed to do in warfare.
Right.
The fury is not the fury of the Moabites. The fury
Oh,
is
yeah.
the fury of God against the Israelites.
Yeah, it's
Because
definitely God.
They're obeying a bad order, which, as we know from the Nuremberg trials, you're not supposed to do.
True. Now, I completely, that's what I thought as well, thinking, okay, yeah, they did this thing they're not supposed to do, but they were told to do it. This is what, let me just do something here. I'm trying to do the directing of who gets spotlighted and who doesn't and whatever, while I'm also trying to talk, which is hard to do both at the same time. Okay, so here's what he says. A great fury came against Israel. This denouement is surely perplexing from a monotheistic point of view. Fury is usually the term for God's devastating rage against Israel when the people has transgressed. Here, however, Israel has done no wrong. Now, we think they've done something wrong because they cut down the fruit trees, but apparently not. And the descent of the fury explicitly reverses Elisha's favorable prophecy, right? Elisha said, you're going to do okay. God's going to take care of you. God will give you water and go destroy the trees. So why all of a sudden? This turn of events might reflect an early tradition that accords Chemosh, the Moabite god, power that must be propitiated by human sacrifice, so that he will then blight the enemies of Moab. So in other words, it could be, and we've seen this happen many times. You've got a little piece of something that's a remnant of some other story or some other tradition. For example, Mi Chamocha, the song we sing after the Israelites cross the Sea of Reeds. And the Israelites sing, Mi Chamocha, who is like you, God, among the gods? Well, what gods? I thought there weren't any other ones, okay? So it's possible that this fury is actually the fury of the Moabite god. Because once the sacrifice was made, and they're two consecutive verses, right? The sacrifice is made to kill, they kill the kid. Now the Moabite god is feeling pretty good. And so maybe it's his fury that's being descended upon the Israelites. Who knows?
But in the 10 Commandments, it also says, thou shalt have no other gods before me, which implies there are gods.
Exactly, Sandy, exactly. That's the other example that I would have given, which is that you shall have no other gods. Well, what other gods, right? So the scholarly understanding of this is that we don't go from polytheism to monotheism in one fell swoop, okay? So you start with polytheism, where you believe in many gods. And before you get to monotheism, where you believe there's only one God, you go through a stage called monolatry, where there is a belief in many gods, but yours is the best, or the only one that you care about. And actually, in the Bible, the first time there's any mention of only one God is in Isaiah, which is much later. So you have these leftovers, even at the beginning of the Bible, in the beginning of the Torah, where it says, God says, let us make human beings. What is this about let us make human beings? So one explanation has been, oh, well, that is the royal we. Well, God never uses the royal we anywhere else. So why would God start off with the royal we? And there's a midrash that God asked the angels, what should we do? But a scholar, and he's not the only one, thinks that it's a leftover from the days when there was a female consort, because our God, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, is a male God, right? And so from the days when there was a female consort, God is speaking to his beloved consort. and that's a leftover. Who knows? We don't know. All right, let me just finish.
But Rabbi,
Yeah.
in the Israel Museum, there is William Deaver wrote about this, and I'm not sure I have it exactly right, but there's like a small altar to God, to Yahweh, and right next to it is Asherah. And
Uh-huh.
in the, I think in the old legends, Asherah was the consort.
Yes, absolutely. That's who it is. That's who it is. So, we just get these leftovers from, the days when there was an understanding. I mean, here we have this God, the God of Israel, who creates life. Isn't that supposed to be what females do? I mean, well,
So
I guess.
maybe the let us, I've always seen it as God encompasses both masculine and feminine, just like the first human. Some rabbis say that Adam and Eve were created in the first human and only later separated.
Right.
And,
correct.
and then doesn't that also say, because this is my argument against Christians, because they tell me this is Christ with God. Let us, I mean, Christ was there at the beginning of our history. And I tell them, no, that there are, 77 names for God that encompass all of these different characteristics. So this is what you're being presented with at the beginning of Bereshit, because it is the beginning, it's your introduction to God. And it's also talking about creation. So,
Yes.
that the idea of creation has to come into this perspective and be tied to what this chapter is all about in Genesis. That's my argument against the evangelicals. And I used to get into this all the time when I taught at Crafton. So, because I can't tell you how many times I heard Jesus was at the beginning of your history and you did not acknowledge it.
That's funny. No, it's true. God, the God of Israel is, everything, all genders. And not only, the first human being, according to the rabbis, was created as a hermaphrodite, both male and female. And only by the second chapter do they get separated. But don't forget, by the way, that one of the names for God, which is what was in our Torah portion, is El Shaddai. What does El Shaddai mean?
Isn't that God of the mountains?
It's the mountain, but the mountains that look like what?
Breasts.
Exactly. So that's a very female kind of, or feminine, I don't know what to say anymore about genders, but anyway, notion of God. And also don't forget that, God talks about carrying the Israelites like on eagle wings, like a little eaglet, and, all of these very maternal kind of images. So you get God as the warrior, God as the maternal image, you get all kinds of images of God, right? But it is possible that before all that happened, there was a female consort. Who knows? But that's at least how, other religions of the area had, a male and a female God, right? I mean, that the
aren't our sacrifices different too? Like the other nations, they were sacrificing to feed their gods, because the gods like this, the taste or the whatever, and we don't.
We don't feed our gods. That's true. But remember, for example, when Noah, remember he does a sacrifice once he's, over the flood, and it's a scent that's pleasing to God.
Yeah.
Right. And the sacrifices, when they're burnt, I mean, that's the whole thing. They're burnt, right? And there's this odor that goes to God that somehow God likes, burnt flesh, whatever.
It's a barbecue.
Aren't there different words for sacrifice that indicates, for example, indicates not only the type of offering, but what it's supposed to do? Like there's korban, and then there's something else, and there's something else, and Aren't
Okay,
there
there's-
different words for sacrifice?
Yeah, well, there are different, in other words, korban is the word for sacrifice, but there are different kinds of sacrifices. There's a peace sacrifice. There's,
Right.
atonement sacrifice. There, I mean, there are all these different sacrifices that are listed at the beginning of the book of Leviticus.
Mhm.
Yes, but not human beings, which is again why the Akedah story is supposed to be about how no, we do not sacrifice our children. That is not part of this particular cult. All right, I just want to finish reading what Alter has to say about this business about the fury against Israel. In any case, the story means to explain why Israel and its allies, after an initial victory, were obliged to retreat. A Moabite inscription on a stela discovered in 1868, in which Mesha speaks in the first person, Mesha being the king, right? Triumphantly proclaims a sweeping victory over Israel, though it is not altogether clear whether this victory is over Jehoram or his predecessor. So, yeah, they're trying to explain, they were told they're going to be victorious and then they're not. Something must have happened. What was it? Maybe it's this Moabite god that decided to punish them once he got invigorated by the sacrifice, right? Okay, let's, did we finish that chapter? We did, so we can go on to the next one. And Christine, did you want to read?
Yeah, I can do that.
Here we go. I think you're the one.
Okay.
who-
Yes, that's right. The wife of a man from the company of the prophets cried out to Elisha, "Your servant, my husband, is dead, and you know that he revered the Lord. But now his creditor is coming to take my 2 boys as his slaves." Elisha replied to her, "How can I help you? Tell me, what do you have in your house?" "Your servant has nothing there at all," she said, "except a small jar of olive oil." Elisha said, "Go around and ask all your neighbors for empty jars. Don't ask for just a few. Then go inside and shut the door behind you and your sons. Pour the oil into all the jars, and as each is filled, put it to one side." She left him and shut the door behind her and her sons. They brought the jars to her, and she kept pouring. When all the jars were full, she said to her son, "Bring me another one." But he replied, "There is not a jar left." Then the oil stopped flowing.
Okay, so what we have here is a miracle,
Yeah.
right? She has just a teeny bit of oil and it just keeps flowing and flowing. So apparently, now, by the way, his name is pronounced Elisha, not Elisha.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Elijah and Elisha. No, it's okay. I just, these miracle stories, you're going to see, well, Elijah did perform some miracles, right? I mean, reviving a dead kid and things like that, right? Which is what Elisha is going to do as well. And these apparently, these miracle stories are the basis for the Jesus miracle stories. So Jane, Jesus comes back again.
Right. So cue the loaves and fishes.
The loaves and fishes and yeah, many other things. Okay, let's go back to this. Go down.
Okay. One day Elisha went to Shunem, and a well-to-do woman was there who urged him to stay for a meal. So whenever he came by, he stopped there to eat. She said to her husband, "I know that this man who often comes our way, is a holy man of God. Let's make a small room on the roof and put it in it."
Oh, oops, sorry, I muted you by mistake. Sorry. Christine, can you unmute?
Oh, I am so sorry.
It's
Okay.
my fault. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
I'll start over. One day Elisha went to Shunem, and a well-to-do woman was there who urged him to stay for a meal. So whenever he came by, he stopped there to eat. She said to her husband, "I know that this man who often comes our way is a holy man of God. Let's make a small room on the roof and put in it a bed and a table, a chair, and a lamp for him. Then he can stay there whenever he comes to us." One day when Elisha came, he went up to his room and lay down there. He said to his servant Gehazi, "Call the Shunammite." So he called her, and she stood before him. Elisha said to him, "Tell her, you have gone to all this trouble for us. Now what can be done for you? Can we speak on your behalf to the king or the commander of the army?" She replied, "I have a home among my own people." What can be done for her? Elisha asked.
Okay, let me ask you, before we continue. Do you notice anything about how Elisha relates to this woman?
Well, he speaks to her as an equal. You know,
Really? Okay.
she's,
Does he speak to her?
oh, no, he's not speaking to her. Until the end. Is that what? Oh, no,
Well,
he doesn't speak to her.
well, notice what he does is that he said he has his servant
Yeah,
call her,
yeah.
right?
you
And
tell
then
her.
the tells the servant to talk to her, right? And what can we do? He talks about her in the third person. And I'm sure she has a name, but there's no name, just the
Yeah.
Shunammite, right? And you're going to see throughout the story that he really doesn't pay a lot of attention to her. And I don't know what that indicates. All it does is maybe some kind of misogyny. But he really, again, here, I mean, she's standing right there. He could talk to her directly. Right?
Wow. Well, might it be a sign of of respect that she, he doesn't consider her, like a wife or a concubine that you would talk to directly?
This is
Probably not.
what Alter says about call the Shunammite, this Shunammite. This form of reference seems a bit condescending. And if he has taken the trouble to learn her name, he is not disposed to use it. And then say to her, pray, in verse 13. Even though the woman is now standing before Elisha, he does not address her directly, but instead has Gehazi put the question to her on his behalf. And then, as I said, you'll see further that he just really doesn't seem to be paying any attention to her, which is very weird. And again, I don't know what the reason is, except maybe he's just a misogynist.
Would the Orthodox take that particular section and use it as a reason for their separation of women versus men and women having a certain place in the society and in the family, et cetera, et cetera? I mean, because it seems to me that he separates herself. He's a prophet. He shouldn't be, hanging around women. So having Gehazi, having the servant talk to her, is a way of having your door open when you're conferring with a student of the opposite sex. You can't have that
That's a
accusation
sign of respect.
of sexual harassment or inappropriate touching or whatever. I read it as his orthodoxy.
Well, I don't know if the Orthodox use that. It's possible, but
Makes
again,
sense.
did someone want to say something? Sorry. Who knows what the reason is?
Hmm.
Christine.
Did they speak the Shunammite? Did they speak the same language as them? Because Gehazi could be a translator.
I think they spoke the same language. I don't know the details, but
Yeah.
it's just a sort of odd thing. As you'll see, we'll
Yeah.
continue the story and you'll see that, he continues to be quite dense when it comes to her. I don't know what that's about.
So, not the first time.
No. All right, so let's go ahead. So
Okay.
Elisha was saying, what can we do for her? And as though Elisha didn't know.
Yeah.
She has no son and her husband is
She
old.
has- is
Hello?
old.
Okay.
Then Elisha said, call her. So he called her and she stood in the doorway. About this time next year, Elisha said, you will hold a son in your arms. No, my lord, she objected. Please, man of God, don't mislead your servant. Back to the sexual harassment of students.
Yeah.
But the woman became pregnant, and the next year, about the same time, she gave birth to a son, just as Elisha had told her. The child grew, and one day he went out to his father, who was with the reapers. He said to his father, my head, my head. His father told the servant, carry him to his mother. After the servant had lifted him up and carried him to his mother, the boy sat on her lap until noon, and then he died. She went up and laid him on the bed of the man of God, then shut the door and went out.
So when he says you're going to have a child,
Ah,
she says, don't,
don't
tempt me
read.
with wonderful futures that aren't going to happen, but it
Or
does happen.
maybe, or maybe she's worried about getting raped.
Oh,
Don't mislead me.
yeah, I think what she
Yeah,
means
don't
is I'm
promise me.
worried that,
Yeah.
you're telling me I'm gonna have a kid, I'll get all excited, it won't happen, and then I'll be
Yeah.
like bummed out. But I think that's more,
Yeah.
but again, it's interesting about Elisha, because remember, he had to go to a stringed instrument to get inspiration. He then gives a prophecy that goes against what Deuteronomy says about war. And then he treats this woman as though she weren't really standing there. He doesn't notice that she doesn't have a kid. Why does the servant know that she doesn't have a son and that her husband is old? He's supposed to be a prophet, for God's sakes, right? So I don't know why he's in here looking sort of not so great. Certainly what's possible is, we know that the Bible is a compilation of a lot of different strands of material. Maybe there were a bunch of people who didn't like Elisha and wanted to make him look bad.
Well,
Or maybe,
well, to me, her standing in the doorway is another sort of indication that she is, she's deferring, but she's also, that he's a stranger, and you don't just go into a room with a strange man. It's like, you don't do that. And, and then he's saying, all this crazy stuff, she's being a
How
little
much-
cautious here.
But Christine, how much of a stranger can he be if she built the room for him?
Yeah, well, you build a room for somebody, but you don't know them. I mean, she doesn't
but
know him.
Yes, she does. She says, it says in the text that he
I
dropped
know. He
by
came by a lot.
often.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
came by
I mean,
often.
Alicia's not stupid. He's going to get a good meal there.
Yeah,
Beginning, and now he has his own room there. She's a mark.
yeah.
yeah, it really does not put Elisha in a great light. That's for damn sure.
That's really funny.
All right, let's see what happens.
Hmm.
Let's go down here.
Okay. Okay.
So this is particularly horrible, because the kid comes and is still alive, and then puts his head on the mother's lap, and next thing you know, he's dead. And so the mother has to see him dying. And then she puts him up on the bed, right? And this is Elisha's bed.
Mhm.
So let's see what happens.
She called her husband and said, "Please send me one of the servants and a donkey, so I can go to the man of God quickly and return." "Why go to him today?" he asked. "It's not the new moon or the Sabbath." "Well, that's all right," she said.
Okay, so I'm sorry. Here we go again. Okay, the kid is dead.
Yeah.
And she's saying, let's get this donkey so we can go to, get Elisha. And the husband goes, why? Why are you trying to go to town? It's not a holiday. It's is he totally dense? Is she invisible to all men? They don't, nobody seems to notice, anything with regard to her. It's kind of stunning. All right.
Okay.
So let's go back down here.
Okay. She saddled the donkey and said to her servant, "Lead on. Don't slow down for me unless I tell you." So she set out and came to the man of God at Mount Carmel. Then he saw her in the distance. The man of God said to his servant Gehazi, "Look, that's the Shunammite. Run to meet her and ask her, 'Are you all right? Is your husband all right? Is your child all right?' 'Everything is all right,' she said.
Come on, okay, you're a prophet and
Yeah.
you don't know that the kid died? Okay, whatever.
Okay. Well, we didn't say he was a good prophet. When she reached the man of God at the mountain, she took hold of his feet. Gehazi came over to push her away. Okay, there's the touch thing, Jane. But the man of God said, "Leave her alone. She is in bitter distress, but the Lord has hidden it from me and has not told me why." Did I ask you for a son, my lord? She said. Didn't I tell you, don't raise my hopes? Ah, there's the answer. Elisha said to Gehazi, tuck your cloak into your belt, take my staff in your hand and run. Don't greet anyone you meet, and if anyone greets you, do not answer. Lay my staff on the boy's face. But the child's mother said, as surely as the Lord lives and as you live, I will not leave you. So he got up and followed her. Gehazi went on ahead and laid the staff on the boy's face, but there was no sound or response. So Gehazi went back to meet Elisha and told him, the boy has not awakened. When Elisha reached the house, there was the boy lying dead on his couch. He went in, shut the door on the two of them, and prayed to the Lord. Then he got on the bed and lay on the boy, mouth to mouth, eyes to eyes, hands to hands. As he stretched himself out on him, the boy's body grew warm. Elisha turned away and walked back and forth in the room, and then got on the bed and stretched out on him once more. The boy sneezed 7 times and opened his eyes. He's allergic to Elisha. Elisha summoned Gehazi and said, call the Shunammite. And he did. When she came, he said, take your son. She came in, fell at his feet, and bowed to the ground. Then she took her son and went out.
Again, a kind of amazing thing here. I mean, here's the guy who says you're going to have a son. The son, dies, and he sends a servant to revive him. Like, that's not what she was asking for. She asked to have Elisha come and do something. And it's like, well, here, take my staff and go take care of it. Like, and of course, it takes him doing either mouth-to-mouth resuscitation or something else. Hello, are you joining us for Bible study?
The revival that has no name.
So it's all very odd, and I can't say that I can explain it because Robert Alter doesn't explain it. So if he doesn't explain it, then what do I know?
I think it's interesting that Elisha had to lay, he had to put his whole body down on the boy in order to revive him, and he had to breathe into his mouth, because if you look in the New Testament, when they revive the dead, all the power is in the hands. I mean, Jesus does not lay on Lazarus, for example. Of course, Lazarus is in the ground, but you know what I mean. All the power is in the hands, not in this whole body, this whole body thing, which is very intimate. I mean, given the flavor, I don't know what you call it, given the flavor of this part of the Bible, it's also bloody and warfare and this and that. It's incredibly intimate, this moment, I think.
Yeah, you're right.
Between the prophet and this 15-year-old teenager. And I'm really wondering, I think we're making an assumption here, because these are our early prophets. But every time I say the word prophet, I think of this fully formed person imbued with God's Spirit. And I see Elisha as really formative. I mean, he's not like Elijah. He really is a formative. It's almost as if he's feeling his way as to what is this prophet thing that I'm supposed to be doing here? And Elijah is a really hard act to follow. I mean, how do you beat Elijah? You don't. So, Elisha is really stumbling around and we're kind of poking fun at him. But on the other hand, I feel really sorry for him because I think he just doesn't know what to do with all this stuff.
But you may be right. Go ahead, Sandy.
Maybe he's just transferring the warmth of his body into the warmth of the child.
Yeah.
Well, I think you're onto something there, Sandy, because I'll tell you what my friend Robert Alter has to say. He's not my friend. I've never met him, but anyway. It says, although this detail may look to a modern reader like mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, the intention of the ancient writer was more likely that the prophet imparted his own vital warmth,
Thank you.
fueled by prophetic aura, to the child, reviving him in this fashion. And it also makes me think of God breathing into the earth to create
Mhm.
Adam, right?
Mhm, mhm.
So it may not be so much the physical, mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, but I'm imbuing my spirit in you, and that will allow you to, to go on.
It also, I mean, the first plan A was to put the staff on the face.
Right.
That didn't work. Okay, so
Right.
plan B is the full force, but we got to do the body aura.
Right. As I said, this guy does not come across so well here, and maybe since this story comes right after the story of Elijah, it's possible maybe that they're saying, hey, being Elijah is tough. So here's someone who's supposedly has Elijah's mantle, and he's been designated as his successor, but it ain't so easy, even though their names are very similar, right?
And I think it's important that the story makes the point that it's the human contact. I mean, if we were to take this and make it into a macro, it's not a thing that revives you,
Oh, good.
It's a person.
Nice.
And take that into our world.
Mhm.
It really resonates today. We're all involved with things and collecting things, and then you get this declutter, and then we just put more stuff in our, put more stuff to fill up the empty space. So it's a real lesson here. And
Nice.
it's also, I think, a lesson that you can make something, you can make a thing like the Alicia's staff could become like a cult item. You can't that's not it. I mean, if we look at God through the Torah and the Tanakh, but especially through the Torah, there's this emphasis on, for instance, in Genesis, this whole family line of Abraham, and it's all about people and their relationships with each other. That's what fascinates us about the stories in Genesis.
Very nice, Jane.
They're dysfunctional. They're worthy of a soap opera that can go on for 20 years.
I think that's beautiful. The idea that it's not about the object reviving him, but about the sort of vitality, soul, or whatever of Alicia that's going to do it. It's very nice. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments before we go on to the next chapter? No? Okay. And who's going to read the next chapter?
I can do it
Okay. Let me,
as soon as I see it.
yeah, hang on a sec. Oh, wait, we're not, it's not the next
Oh, we're
chapter.
not
I'm sorry. We're
done?
still in the
Oh.
same chapter, Death in the Pot. Okay.
Oh.
So why don't you read a little bit of it? And
So should Christine read that?
okay, Christine, go ahead and finish.
Okay. Elisha returned to Gilgal, and there was a famine in that region. While the company of the prophets was meeting with him, he said to his servant, "Put on the large pot and cook some stew for these prophets."
So let me just say there's this like group of prophets that apparently Elisha is the sort of caretaker. I mean, not in the sense of being, a low level person, but just that he's, in charge of these prophets.
One of them
Now
went
they're
out,
hungry.
yeah, one of them went out into the fields to gather herbs and found a wild vine and picked as many of its gourds as his garment could hold. When he, excuse me.
Bless you.
Yeah, I guess he wasn't the only one who was allergic. So when he returned, he cut them up into a pot of stew, although no one knew what they were. The stew was poured out for the men, but as they began to eat it, they cried out, "Man of God, there is death in the pot," and they could not eat it. Elisha said, "Get some flour." He put it into the pot and said, "Serve it to the people to eat." And there was nothing harmful in the pot.
So again, I'm sorry, but he's a prophet. He tells, they're hungry. He lets them go out and pick stuff. doesn't seem to examine what they got, doesn't seem to know that it's poisonous, and they almost all die.
Yeah.
What kind of prophet is this guy?
And then they're
I mean-
supposed to trust him when he says put flour. in the
Yeah,
pot.
and according to our friend Robert Alter, the flour, there's no reason to think that flour actually does anything like this, but whatever. Maybe it wasn't flour, but that's how it got translated. Okay.
A man came from Baal Salisha, bringing the man of God 20 loaves of barley bread, baked from the first ripe grain, along with some heads of new grain. Give it to the people to eat, Elisha said. How can I set this before 100 men? His servant asked. But Elisha answered, give it to the people to eat, for this is what the Lord says. They will eat and have some left over. Then he set it before them, and they ate it and had some left over according to the word of the Lord.
Okay, so now they're gonna get fed,
Yeah.
hopefully not poisonous loaves. Okay, so now Jane.
On the other hand, if somebody's tried to poison you and they hand out bread, I think you'd leave some behind too. But I can't get my head around this one. Okay.
Okay.
Plus, it's so much like Jesus stole this story and
Oh, yeah, like
Totally.
40 days and 40 nights, you know, what Jesus was in the desert, I think, for 40 days
Yeah.
and 40 nights. And
well, this is
a
the
lot of
loaves and
presidents.
fishes again. You know that.
Well,
Yeah,
don't
loaves of-
forget the fishes and the loaves where there was this whole crowd.
Yeah.
And, what do we have? One loaf, one fish,
Yeah.
and
Right.
multiplying, and he fed
Exactly.
the crowd, and there was leftovers. I mean,
Well, that's what Elisha did with the oil, remember?
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
yeah.
So,
It's amazing, these, I haven't read this section ever. So this is all new to me, but I keep flashing on
Yeah.
the New Testament,
Right.
Absolutely,
and
absolutely.
all
That's
this stuff. It's just like they just took it word for word and then just imposed it on Jesus. I don't even know if Jesus even did this stuff.
oh, well, first of all, you know that the material about Jesus was written a minimum of 60 to 90 years after he died.
I
Yeah.
know that.
Okay, so that's number one. Number two, there's a wonderful book called Who Wrote the New Testament?
Mhm.
I'm trying to remember, can't think of his name right off. I'll look it up.
Bart Ehrman. Is it Bart Ehrman? Or
No.
Yeah.
It's, Mac. His last name is Mac, M-A-C-K.
Oh, okay.
And it's about how the church shaped the New Testament.
Right.
And there's another wonderful book called The Gnostic Gospels by Elaine Pagels. She
Yeah.
talks about
Yeah.
all the gospels that were tossed out,
Yeah.
where people had more direct connection to God without having to go through Jesus or through a priest,
Yeah.
and how women were empowered. God forbid that should stay in the New Testament. So just the way the Torah and the Tanakh were all shaped
Mhm.
to, present a certain picture and to create a certain kind of following. So, yeah, but in order to give legitimacy to somebody like Jesus, right?
Yeah.
I mean, who's Jesus?
Mhm.
You have him do the things that people had already recognized as, powerful in the Old Testament, right? So if he's
Right.
40 days and 40 nights,
Yeah.
he must be like Moses, right?
Yeah. Plus
And,
But it
the
really-
later stories, were found in the Santos papyri that were dug up in the Capitol.
Every day there are new revelations about what Santos has said about his back. It is stunning how many things he's lied about, isn't it?
Yeah, like what's his
Well,
real
he's-
name?
Well, he's going to finally reveal to us that he is God.
Yeah,
And
Oh, he's God,
No.
yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
He's just working up to it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, or that he worked as God for 2 years and then he
Right.
And then decided to become a drag queen.
No,
right.
but the funniest thing about the drag
That's
queen
an
thing.
insult to drag queens. Really, they have
No, but
more
the funniest thing
self-respect.
about that is that, okay, we have a party that's completely opposed to all of
Right.
this, and then one of theirs is a drag queen and he denies it, but it turns out he wrote the entry in Wikipedia.
Right?
It's like, Really, you couldn't make up the stuff. I don't know. Carl, in Canada, do they have crazy people like this in the parliament?
Well, oh, Parliament is notorious.
I'm talking about Canada, the Canadian parliament.
Oh, that's less so. You can find anything in the British Parliament.
What about-
seems unique to the States.
It seems what?
Santos seems like a peculiarity to the States. I've
Uh-huh.
not come across anything quite so wacky up here.
Yeah, it's pretty
It's
amazing.
awful, really, but
Okay, all right. So now we're gonna go to the next chapter, and Jane is going to read.
Okay, just help me. Is it Naaman?
Yeah,
Naaman? Okay, now Naaman was commander of the army of the king of Aram. He was a great man in the sight of his master and highly regarded because through him the Lord had given victory to Aram. He was a valiant soldier, but he had leprosy. Now bands of raiders from Aram had gone out and had taken captive a young girl from Israel. And she served Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress, "If only my master would see the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy."
so let me just say something. So Aram is not Israel, right? And so clearly here, God is offering victory to another country, another nation, which is an interesting thing going on here.
Hey, that's not nice.
What's not nice? I mean, as long as they're not attacking Israel, why
Oh,
not
I
let
see.
him have some victories over some other people? Who knows? And the other interesting thing to me also is that Elisha is in Samaria, which is northern, the northern country of Israel. And he seems to hate the Israel kings, right? I'll only prophecy for you, he says to the northern king, because of the southern king, even though he lives in the north. Just an interesting, strange thing. He's strange all the way around, I think. Okay, so now we got to see if he can be cured of leprosy, which is probably not leprosy, right? It's some kind of white skin, and that's how it's been translated, but it's probably not leprosy.
It's like eczema or something.
It's something where the skin gets very white and scaly, which is not what leprosy does, but that's always how it's been translated. So, and the same
And
thing with.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say Sa'arat, which is in Leviticus, Leviticus, is also translated as leprosy, but it's probably not leprosy. That's just how it's been translated over the
I
years.
thought that when you had leprosy, you were separated from society.
exactly.
Yeah.
Weren't
Yeah.
you isolated because
Yes.
they thought it was catching?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Other people could get it.
yeah. Well, as you know, from Leviticus, then when someone has whatever this thing is, the priest comes and takes them out of the camp. But
Right.
this is a different country or different
Right.
nation, right?
So
This is
they don't
Aram.
separate. Yeah. Okay. All
And
right.
he's- And by the way,
whiteness-
he's the king. So what are you going to do with the king? Stick him
Yeah.
out somewhere outside of the camp? No, you can't do that.
Well, the whiteness of the skin and that kind of thing, that can be plaque psoriasis.
Yeah.
It has that manifestation.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's
that's a
not
good
entirely
idea.
clear what it is.
that's a
but-
good idea, Christine. Yeah.
Many, many years ago, I think Lynn and Sandy will remember this. We brought in a dermatologist, right?
Yeah.
And she showed us different hideous pictures of skin diseases. And she and the idea that you would leave the camp for 7 days and come back, she thought that was actually not an unusual way to treat it.
Yeah.
It would sort of go away after 7 days. That's how I remember it. I don't know, Lynn or Sandy, do you remember something different? Lynn's been, Sandy, Lynn, and I think Ruth and Susie have been, we've been doing this for 10 years. So, but this was a few years ago when we were in the book of Leviticus. You can imagine how long ago that was.
Yeah.
Right? And it was definitely before COVID, when we met in person. Okay, so.
Okay. Naaman went to his master and told him what the girl from Israel had said. "By all means go," the king of Aram replied. "I will send a letter to the king of Israel." So Naaman left, taking with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 sets of clothing. Wow. The letter that he took to the king of Israel read, with this letter I am sending my servant Naaman to you, so that you may cure him of his leprosy.
Oh, by the way, Naaman is not the king, he's the general. Yeah, sorry.
As soon as the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his robes and said, am I God? Can I kill and bring back to life? Why does this fellow send someone to me and be cured of his leprosy? See how he is trying to pick a quarrel with me. When Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his robes, he sent him this message. Why have you torn your robes? Have the man come to me, and he will know that there is a prophet in Israel. So Naaman went with his horses and chariots and stopped at the door of Elisha's house. Elisha sent a messenger to say to him, go wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan, and your flesh will be restored and you will be clean.
Okay, before you go on, and so what the king thinks is that this is a ruse, right? To try to get him off guard or something like that. So he thinks that this is a maneuver or a trap. If he doesn't cure this guy who's the general of the army, which of course he can't do because he's just a mortal king, that the king of Aram will come and attack him. So he doesn't believe that the guy's really just coming to get cured. But apparently he thinks he has to go through the king to get to the prophet. But luckily the prophet heard what was going on, and he says, well, I'll take care of it.
Okay. But Naaman went away angry and said, I thought he would surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, wave his hand over the spot and cure me of my leprosy. Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Couldn't I wash in them and be cleansed? And so he turned and went off in a rage.
Okay, so let's just stop for a second. What's he upset about?
He's not getting personal attention.
Right. He figures, hey, I'm an important guy. Why doesn't this guy come out and talk to me directly? You know, what is this? This is rude. And the other thing is the Jordan River, where he was told to go cleanse himself, is not a really, strong river with lots of water, right? It can be very muddy and icky. So it's like, I'm going to go in there and get cured. Well, how about all the beautiful rivers I have in my own country? What do I need this for? So he feels like he got, basically dissed. Okay. Not only did the guy not come out, but he told him to do something that sounded completely stupid. And so he's leaving. And so it's not going to get cured.
Naaman's servants went to him and said, my father, if the prophet had told you to do some great thing, would you not have done it? How much more then when he tells you, wash and be cleansed? So he went down and he dipped himself in the Jordan 7 times as the man of God had told him. And his flesh was restored and became clean like that of a young boy. I have a question, Rabbi.
Okay.
It's been like 20 years since I've been in a mikveh. How many times do you dip yourself in a mikveh? Was it 4?
3.
3, so it's not 7.
7 is this magical number, right? They went around the city of Jericho 7 times blowing the shofar, right? And all
Right.
this is number. I mean, there's certain numbers: 7, 3, 40, 18.
I was flashing back on that experience as I was reading this, and I couldn't remember how many times I had to dip myself into the pool. So,
But you're right. It is like a mikvah in terms of the purification, because the mikvah is not necessarily all that clean always, right?
yeah. Well, it's supposed to have water that circulates, isn't that
Yes.
part of it?
Yes.
Because we had to do it twice because they had it stopped up and we were
Oh.
all dressed leaving.
Well,
And they came out and they said, guess what? You got to do it again.
oh, lovely. Well,
Yeah.
the mikvah, okay, the mikvah at the American Jewish University, for example. So, I mean, look, a mikvah is a natural body of water. So you can go into a lake, a river, an ocean, whatever. But of course, if you go into an indoor one, how do you make it natural?
Mhm.
You can't pipe water in because that's not natural. So this is what they do. So they have a big body of water, that's the mikvah, that's just piped in water. And then they have a smaller sort of container where they have the natural water. And once the natural water touches the other water, it's all kosher. So how do they get natural water in that little tank that they have?
Mhm.
Anybody know how they do it there? At the
Ice,
Yeah.
Rainwater?
ice.
ice.
Oh,
Because once you have ice and it melts, that's natural. There are always ways around everything, you know, which is why Jews make good lawyers, right? But you're right, it is like the mikvah. Okay, let's put down here.
Okay. Where are we?
Okay, he's trying to offer him some gifts.
Right. The prophet answered, as surely as the Lord lives, whom I serve, I will not accept a thing. And even though Naaman urged him, he refused. If you will not, said Naaman, please let me, your servant, be given as much earth as a pair of mules can carry, for your servant will never again make burnt offerings and sacrifices to any other god but the Lord. But may the Lord forgive your servant for this one thing. When my master enters the temple of Ramon to bow down, and he is leaning on my arm, and I have to bow there also. When I bow down in the temple of Ramon, may the Lord forgive your servant for this. Go in peace, Elisha said.
Okay, let's stop there for a second. So Elisha says, I don't need any gifts. As far as Elisha is concerned, what is his reward is the fact that this guy is now being converted, right? Naaman is now saying there's only one God, and that's the God of Israel, and I am now going to be a servant of that God. So that's his reward. He doesn't need any material things. And so, and what's he saying down here in verse 18?
He's saying that he's the support for his master. I mean, his master leans on him when they go into this pagan temple. So whatever his master does, he has to do.
Mm-hmm.
He has to be supple. He has to be flexible. He has to be, in a certain sense, mindless now.
Yeah,
Because he's in a pagan temple, bowing down to pagan things. So he's touching the earth of this pagan temple.
Yeah, well, he's, you know, he can't exactly say to his master, I'm not bowing down to, you know, to this God, right? He's got to, like, at least, you know, go through the motions of serving this other God, but he doesn't, you know, he will no longer do it and mean it, right?
Right.
So he's saying, look, you know, I can't change all my ways because, like, I've got a job and that job requires this. The reason here that he's asking for earth is because his belief is that the only place that you can make sacrifices to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh is on earth from Israel. That's his strange idea. That's why he's asking for the earth. So he's going to make sacrifices to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh on the earth from Israel, but he's also going to have to do his job and, you know, pretend that he cares about this other guy. And Elisha says, not a problem, buddy.
Right. After Naaman had traveled some distance, Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, the man of God, said to himself, my master was too easy on Naaman, this Aramean, by not accepting from him what he brought. As surely as the Lord lives, I will run after him and get something from him.
I mean, remember, the guy showed up with all kinds of wonderful stuff that Elisha said, nah, I don't need any of that. Now the
Right.
servant is going, wait a second.
Yeah, right. We need
Why
that.
that's ridiculous. Like, let's go get it.
So Gehazi hurried after Naaman. When Naaman saw him running toward him, he got down from the chariot to meet him. Is everything all right? He asked. Everything is all right, Gehazi answered. My master sent me to say 2 young men from the company of the prophets have just come to me from the hill country of Ephraim. Please give them a talent of silver and 2 sets of clothing.
Okay, let me stop you right here. If this does not sound like George Santos, look what he's saying. He's saying there are these 2, the reason I'm coming to get this stuff is not so you can pay my master or me or whatever. They're 2 poor guys who need some food and clothing.
Mm-hmm.
I like to get it for them. Remember George Santos did a whole charity for animals supposedly? And there was a vet, a homeless vet with a dog who needed money for his dog to get operated on. He collected the money, like $3,000, and kept it. It's like, is there anything new under the sun? Seriously. Or maybe George Santos read this and said, hey, good idea, Okay. So what's going to happen? He says, give me this stuff for these poor guys.
Right. By all means, take 2 talents, said Naaman. He urged Gehazi to accept them, then tied up the 2 talents of silver in 2 bags with 2 sets of clothing. He gave them to 2 of his servants, and they carried them ahead to Gehazi. When Gehazi came to the hill, he took the things from the servants and put them away in his house. He sent the men away, and they left. When he went in and stood before his master, Elisha asked him, where have you been, Gehazi? Your servant didn't go anywhere, Gehazi answered. But Elisha said to him, was not my spirit with you when the man got down from the chariot to meet you? Is this the time to take money or to accept clothes or olive groves and vineyards or flocks and herds or male and female slaves? Naaman's leprosy will cling to you and to your descendants forever. Then Gehazi went from Elisha's presence, and his skin was leprous. It had become as white as snow.
So, yeah. Well, the strange thing here is this is the first time that Elisha seems to know about something going on behind his back, right?
Yeah.
I mean, up until now, he didn't seem to notice anything that was happening, or that the woman had no child or whatever was going on. He was completely oblivious. And now all of a sudden, he seems to know that his servant went and stole the stuff, which is kind of strange. And then he gets punished, of course, right? Any thoughts about these stories about Elisha? Because we could start the next chapter,
We
but
only have 4 minutes.
we only have 4 minutes. Yes. So I think we won't start the next chapter. So just any final comments before we go?
It does seem like a collection, sort of like a random collection of different types of stories that might have come from different places. So it's kind of interesting.
That's absolutely very true and very accurate observation, because apparently it's not clear from these stories like what the timeline is. Like, are we talking about consecutive kings, or is this just a mishmash of different stories? Absolutely, it's not at all clear like where they all come from, and it's not a timeline that we can really follow. So yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right about that. This is a, compilation of stories that probably come from a lot of different sources, trying to show Elisha's, magical powers. That is when he's actually alert to what's going on around him.
And I noticed they're sort of read that way, like in the way, like even the way they're assigned to the different parshot, like from the Haftorah, like it's not like in order. It's like, here's 2 chapters that go with this, and then here's this 1 chapter goes over here, and then these 2 go over here. So like if you read it in that weekly way, and maybe it would make more sense because you wouldn't be reading it like we just did. You'd be reading like this part with Leviticus and this part with Genesis. And
Yeah. I don't know how much of this is used for Haftorahs. But Haftorah is from the prophets, and sometimes it comes from these books. Kings, as opposed to the bigger prophets. But yeah, it's kind of a mishmash. So thank you all for joining today. It's
It
always
was a
fun.
wonderful session.
you.
Thank you,
I love
Rabbi.
it.
It's always a
Thanks
lot
for
of
all
fun,
your
especially you guys all have
commentaries.
great comments. What, Christine?
And the commentaries are just fantastic from everyone.
Yes.
Good.
Christine, how are you feeling?
I've been better. And
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
on the 31st, I get more cortisone shots in my hips, and then I'll be more mobile.
Oh.
But meanwhile, it's every 4 months, and that third month going into the fourth month is just awful.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. So, but I'm alive. My head is sort of working, and it's just sort of.
All right. Who says Torah
I
study
just
is not
can't
fun?
move much.
All right. Well, have a great Shabbat and a good weekend, and we'll see you
Thank
next.
you.
But oh, by the way,
Thanks for
tomorrow,
asking, by the way.
please
Yeah.
tune in tomorrow, okay? At 11 a.m.
Mm.
Alden Solovey, who is somebody whose poetry I read a lot during services, who's a wonderful poet, is going to talk about Shabbat and the prayers and how they give us meaning. And it really, I'm sure it'll be a wonderful session. So it's this Sunday and next Sunday at,
11?
actually, is it 10? No, wait, let me double check.
11 o'clock.
I think it's
have it
11.
on my
Okay, it's 11.
calendar.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Rabbi, will it be taped? Because
Yes, it's always taped.
Okay, thank you.
And then, as you know, in the afternoon, there's some security, like CPR training, which I also really encourage you to go to.
Oh,
It's 3 hours, but it's worth it.
okay.
Okay, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Great to see everybody again.
Yeah, wonderful.